Well, friends, I shall let us endeavor to make a vlog. I'll try to clearly set out. It's more, uh, be more direct, and clearly set out. I'm going to talk about, I was going to do only mastering, but I think I'll talk about the environments and mixing too, and sort of clearly define those things. Um, I told somebody years ago, doing computers, whenever you get stumped on anything, um, that computers are real simple. You just have to indicate something and then act upon it. So uh, that's really important in a computer. You ever have a problem, you need to indicate something and then act upon it. It gets tricky though, but anyway, with that in mind, mastering, what is it, and it's the kind of thing that gets neglected a lot. And what it is it's putting, and that wind may really interfere with this today. I probably should move closer and get more proximity effect on the microphone. But it's taking a group of songs or audio and collecting it together, and putting the spaces that appear in between, clipping the noise off, editing the first parts so it comes in clean, creating fade outs or fades, and all of that sort of technical stuff. And it's both technical and artistic, and I lean towards sticking with it's both. They really can't be separated there. No tea left. So the main things that go on, it's also, that wind is probably going to screw me over, but it's both technical and artistic. And the main things that go on is you bring it up to a punchy broadcast level where it's hot enough to be accepted anywhere, as far as the signal being sort of relative to other signals, the song levels being relative to other songs on the radio, relative to other EQs. Sort of, it's a black art, but it gets neglected a lot. So the main things that go on are, so you're bringing it up to a broadcast specification, and there's so much here. And the main things that go on are equalization, compression, and limiting. Although I lean towards anymore limiting, mostly, because my mixes are pretty right on. And the better the mix, the better the master will sound, and the recording, the better thing will come out. The better the mix, the better product will come out of mastering. And I mean, there's a lot to be said there. But it gets neglected. It's the final sheen of art and the artistic and the technical together. So generally, what you do is you let's take a song, and if the mixes are good, and they have plenty of dynamic range, they'll sound good. And the source is an issue. I mean, I've tried, and I've got I did have thousands, well, I still do actually, have 4-track cassette recordings. It's a great notepad, and I knew one guy who could do an amazing job on it, on his, and mine never really worked out. That's how I ended up as going to school, and for all of this stuff. I wondered why my recordings didn't sound as good as the radio. But the source of, in other words, garbage in, garbage out. So with 4-track cassette stuff, I'm just waking up to, or 1/4 inch tape. I mean, we're kind of out of the tape era. Um, so pushing tape to get natural compression from saturation, tape saturation, and mastering is kind of a non-issue. But you know, uh, the harder that you try to master 4-track cassette stuff, and I had people willing to pay, $2,500 for 10 songs. It's about $300 a song when I master something. That's why I have a bad attitude mastering my own stuff. If it seems like it's going to be really good, I master it. If not, I'm just like, well, So, but I've started mastering everything lately. I should master everything. A lot of people miss that out of ignorance or laziness. So, you've got a song. The absolute main thing that goes on is overall limiting. And there's a couple of different schools of thought on that. You can have a long release or a long release, or you can have a quick release, which gives you more. And they both sort of have. You're looking for something that makes it seem smooth. They each have their own characteristics. Man, it's hot out here today, and anyway, what you want to do is you've got a good mix as you limit. And always leave some dynamic range where not only can you hear it, but you can see the meters, or at least at the top, just kissing the reds. And maybe, as you push them into and pull the threshold down, what happens is it's the final thing that ties an entire mix together. And I could give you years on this and years on how to do specific types of program material, But what I do, you have to give it be very right brain on it and not get nitpicky. I mean, totally nitpicky in one way, and the other way just kind of go, does this work or not? But one of the things you can do, and I use now frequency dependent compression, or limiting, better said, and more accurate. And one of the things that, as you listen to I would always ask the producers involved with this stuff, hey, what issues are you having with these mixes, And people get nuts, and if they come in for mastering, I used to charge double if they attended, because they're such a nuisance and they don't really get what's going on. And but I'd ask them, well, what problems are you having with this? These mixes, and sometimes they would say, oh, I want more snare, or oh, I want more vocal, or the guitars aren't defined. And what it is I used to use EQ, limiting, and compression. Now I pretty much use my mixes are almost right on, because I did them, so I know what's there. I almost always use pretty much limiting only, and but not exactly, because it's frequency dependent limiting. So the idea is, here's a line, here's your song, here's an EQ line, here's your song pulsing along, and if something's jumping out too much, like S-ing on the vocals, you can reach in with EQ or frequency dependent limiting and sort of tuck that back in. You'll find you can sweep along and tuck it back in. But I'm talking, you're pumping the thing up. You're bringing the low end, the pulse. You gotta shoot him just for driving by. The pulse of the song, as you limit and bring it all up, all these frequencies, as it gets more hot and pumpy, and pumpy is associated with a long release limiting. And it can be the kiss of life or death to a mix. It's like I said, there's two kind of different basic setups out of and then thousands of variations. But basically, you're bringing the drum kit and it ties the whole thing together. And as you and it makes it pulse together. The bass guitar meets the kick drum and locks up nicely, and then you really can give it authority, which should be done in the mix already. And then you know, those harmonics ripple through the mix, and then you also bring up, and this is on everything at once, so you have to consider everything that's going on. It's crazy. One wrong move can be the kiss of death, or one right one the kiss of life. A good general rule is I don't really, if I have to boost or cut more than 3 dB in mastering, you get into corrective mastering, which is then an artistic call. And those, at any price, I started turning people away who wanted to do that, because it's just, it's a complete hassle, and it's not something you can say, hey, this is technically and artistically right. It's like, well, this is technically this way because I made an artistic call, and then they can complain or not, or want you to do 100 that way. But anyway, it's both. And the better the mixes sound by having a lot of dynamic range, which is how you wake your brain up. Sound wakes your brain up when you're listening to something. If things jump out, you don't want to kill your dynamic range in mastering, but you want to bring it up. You want to make it even more punchy, hopefully. So, if somebody wants a snare somewhere around 1 or 2K, or a warmer snare like 800 hertz, you can bring it up just a little, or not separately, but everything in the whole mix is coming up there too, so you have to be extremely careful. I've destroyed very little, but I have in mastering, and I've destroyed stuff I was the only one who really knew it was destroyed. The artist didn't even realize it, but I was like, and not totally destroyed, but just not what it could have been, So, but say if you're defining guitars, at 2K, or somewhere around 2K, guitars seem to live, 2.5. The entire mix seems to live at 2.5, around in 2 and 3K, in between there. But the idea is, with frequency dependent limiting, is that with EQ you're always adjusting the phase relationship of certain frequencies. Let's say I'm EQing in the overall file and mastering, trying to bring out a snare. Well, and stuff's good nowadays, and there are people who will argue these points. They're finer points, but if they were I said it before, if they were correct, I would agree with them. I love that. But after if you're working in a home studio situation or wherever, after you get your final mix done, master it, and ideally you should record in one environment, in one room, recording studio, mix in another recording studio, and master in a final mastering lab. But it's the overall sound and control over your dynamic range and your frequency response at what ranges. But you want to pretty, discretion is the better part of valor, because stuff that sounds great at the moment can tend to be sort of not have a long shelf life. And there's something also, so I'm talking about pushing it hard and mastering. Sometimes in my own stuff, I always, well, not always, but I feel free to. With professional clients, I had to use some discretion, because I would find pushing it really hard made it sound fantastic. But that's also likely to cause something called listener fatigue, which is when everything is all at one level. It's just all a drone of stuff in a mix, and there's nothing leaping out. It gets to be, it causes listener fatigue, monotonous, boring, annoying, tiresome. Much like the frequency range and dynamic range of these V-logs. They're great to sleep with. I'm proofing them sometimes, falling asleep. But if you grab a couple of things out of it. So anyway, the idea of mastering that bird's in a frequency range, it'll just leap right into this camera. Which kind of, I was thinking on the V-logs, a good example of variety and you know, dynamic range and frequency response, is that the um, those birds and stuff like that leaping out sort of help give some variety, and music in every way, both artistically and technically. And this is probably the most significant thing that anybody's ever said to me that I really now completely get and understand, is that music is tension and release. Okay? And so is the mix. And so is, you know, in mastering, you're pretty much just maximizing those things. But tension and release, meaning there should be something. And I see all the time on YouTube, I'm getting off on a tangent, but people write one part of what seems to be a great song and there's no second part. So all you have is tension, or all you have is release. But listen to a Beatles song and apply that. Tension and release. It's, you know, it's the kind of thing where, you know, I don't know, name any Beatles song. Well, there's the local meth head biker. These guys are, I don't know, I don't deal with anybody because I don't want to get involved. I don't want to be bothered. But in a mix too, there should be elements. And you know, the first verse stuff going on, and then I did one that I haven't even put anywhere released yet, where just that extra, I put a tambourine, and you know, it's going along, and then I put a tambourine in the verse to add. It just wasn't enough tension there, and put it in a big reverb, and that opened it wide up. I'm probably not going to get to the environments here. I'll do another one on that. It's hot out here, probably later today. But anyway, you know the Beatles songs. Help, I need somebody, help, just anybody. There's your tension. Help. Then here's a release. When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. You know, and then it builds up. So there's always tension. They were masters of that. That's why their stuff is so great. And it's the same with mixing. Tension and release, elements that jump in and out with dynamic range, which gives you tension and release in a mix. Because if you get everything, there's something going on called volume wars that have to do with mastering. It's getting it as hot as you possibly can, but when you crush the dynamic range, and when everything is loud, and dig on this, if you will, when everything is loud, everything is soft. And what I'm saying, especially in film mixes, because nothing leaps out at you, so all somebody has to do is turn the volume down and nothing leaps out anymore. And it's a boring mix that causes you to get annoyed and tired, because in mastering, you're bringing the low end and the high end roughly more together, more like a drone, you know. And I'm not even going to make any comparisons with droning. But you guys watch these by choice, you know. Nobody's got a gun to your head. But the point is that there's no, and I'm going to do a whole one on psychoacoustics too, what sound actually means to us and what we think it means. And there's sort of Jungian, I'm getting off here a little bit, but not really. There's sort of Jungian archetypes in sound, where different types of sound in different environments have sort of different core meanings to everybody. And that's kind of relates to mastering, because you want to make it listenable, but still with definition. But the idea is that you pump it up in a limiter and bring it up to broadcast specs, and the better your mixes are, the better the master is. So, but you're responsible. I mean, imagine the pressure I went through for years and years and years. When you're the final set of ears that has to say, yes, you know, this is fantastic, it's acceptable, I was able to work with it. Because sometimes I had to ask for other mixes, you know. If I have to do too much corrective mastering, I would rather not. It's more enhancing. And in mixing, you cut frequencies out, because frequencies like bass guitar and guitars, you want them to lock together, but when you push frequencies together mixing, they sometimes create 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th harmonics that are unpleasant. So it sounds bigger and spacier if you do subtractive EQ and mixing. Then in mastering, you can bring up the bass, and if there's none there, you can't work with it. Or you can bring up the mids, and then balance them out perfectly. And sometimes shimmery high, like 16K and above, 14K and above, somewhere around 20K a dB or so. But anything more than 3 dB of cut or boost in mastering, and 3 dB represents a doubling of power, is getting a little, you might be suspicious of the mixes. Although sometimes I've taken stuff that was complete ear garbage coming in and been able to work miracles on it, but not usually. But you can, and I told people with the 4-track cassette are really whatever. I mean, I've got a ton of them, and luckily I transferred them to digital, but they still can't be mastered. They don't have any dynamic range or frequency response. It's a great notepad, and it used to be cheap. Now it's cheaper on a computer. Use a good, and I'll stop after this, but it's free now. And why is that? You can use your computer to capture whatever, even if it's low quality, upload it to YouTube, and that's your free cassette. It's free storage. That's an excellent analogy of how things have changed, So, in other words, the cassettes used to cost money and you'd run out. Now you just use your computer and use YouTube as your free cassette, there's a lot of stuff there, but overall it's the overall EQ, and you can bring certain elements out, but you're always going to adjust in mastering. Again, you want to bring out more vocal. Around 1K you'll find a little notch, and usually a curve on the EQ, not a sharp spike, but a gentle bell curve. It's called the bell curve, is the best. Because when you throw a spike in there, just one tiny little spike EQ at 10K, suddenly you start getting this little phasey crap, phase shifting that's unpleasant. It causes the dreaded listener fatigue. And you want everything to be, sometimes you can really, these kids, Skrillex and every kid nowadays, they're pushing and mastering how hot these mixes are, as hot as they can get. And why is that? Because it sounds very punchy and professional in a way when you do that, but you also lose dynamic range and frequency response. So all somebody has to do is turn their listening volume down at home, because everything else is kind of, let's say you're listening to the internet and something, stuff sort of jumps out at a certain level, and then you hear a couple of songs, these dubstep kids, which I like all music, I really do. I like some elements of dubstep. It's a long way to the bottom, Skrillex, it's all kids with like a laptop and they got lucky, but you're listening to something at home, and it seems, everything's about the same level, a nice RMS, root mean square level, and then something just jumps out like crazy. It sounds, oh wow, this is great and exciting, but it is cool. You want your stuff to be as hot as it can possibly be without clipping or distorting. However, with dynamic range in it, where your drums have a pulse, I mean, there's so much here, where your bass has a pulse, your vocals come in and out with volume, not just smashed everything flat at one level. That can sound great, but it tends to cause listener fatigue. So to recap, it's mastering is grabbing, putting all of the songs, capturing them, cleaning up the beginnings, creating the fade outs, the spaces between them so that they have an artistic impact. I've spent hours and hours just with people with unlimited budgets choosing the spaces in between songs till I had to tell them to choose or leave. I notice those birds do add some sort of psychoacoustic effect in my vlog, actually keep me interested. Although if you pick out, even I don't expect anybody to watch them all, and some people do like crazy, but if you pick out one element, one thing that I've said, then all of these are sort of generalities that could be extremely helpful, and it took hard-fought, hard-won stuff. But anyway, putting all of your, as far as mastering, and it's mainly what I did professionally on thousands of albums of all different levels. There's a lot of stuff out there that I've done on the very highest levels. So uh, it's overall equalization, so that it doesn't have too much trash or stuff at the top, too much roar at the bottom. And generally today, the other thing with frequency dependent limiting, why I choose that over EQ is that if you have a roar that's kind of nice, but it's kind of a distraction to your music, you can use frequency dependent um, um, limiting to push that roar down where it pulses with the music nicely and adds some body. You get to keep that beautiful low edge. Whereas before you would have to get rid of it by rolling it off, and you're adjusting the phase of the low end of your music so it doesn't sound, anytime phase is adjusted, unless it's a goal and a target to have uh, something that doesn't sound as positive. They make phase shifters as an effect. It can be great, but not usually on your overall mix, except something weird or spacey, who knows. But anyway, the point is that you get, with frequency dependent compression and limiting, you get to keep those frequencies, but now the bass isn't eating up your entire mix. It's under control, and that's what makes mixes sound great, is when and that's part of the environments, all good reverb and stuff I'll get into uh, um, in the next one, is that when things sound like they're under control all the time, people say, oh my god, your voice dominates this mix and so on. Well, this kind of, yeah, because I sing where the stuff is, the music is at a whisper, and I'm able to dominate the entire thing and get a real sense of it. But more than that, it's the way I mix it where the vocal seems to dominate it. So, but when things sound controlled through control of frequencies with EQ and dynamic range with compression and limiting, um, it's what we love about mixes. It just sounds like, oh gosh, these guys are masters of their craft, totally controlled. Uh, and as you delve into this stuff, you learn that that's all a studio illusion in a way. So, I remember the first time I saw a great engineer. I happened to be working right next to him, and I saw him take just horrible, like dry as a bone sounding tracks and take this unformed clay, and I saw as he compressed the drums and got them to punching, and then the bass roars in and excellent, and I realized, oh, this is a whole thing too, being able to create this illusion of control in a mix of music. I mean, and he didn't just he totally re-envisioned the song with the mix, and exactly perfect, and that's what I thought. And you can re-envision a song with a mix, although he was more mixing to accentuate what was great about what was there. So there's a couple of different philosophies. But yeah, in mastering, you can accentuate what's great about a mix. And again, subtractive EQ and mixing, additive EQ and mastering. Be sure and punch it up, but if it's too punchy, you lose your frequency response and dynamic range, and then it's not exciting at all. It's just sort of monotone noise. So anyway, I will draw no comparisons to my own vlog on that last statement. But that's a brief explanation. I missed a ton of stuff. Every song is different in a way, they are. And there's a whole lot you can be done. It's the final sheen that's added. But you generally, limiting and don't overdo it, but the art of it is making everything seem to hang together tight and have a nice pulse with a wonderful clear mid-range and thrilling highs. Now I'm all about the mid, so I'm going to stop. I'm all about the mid-range. Everything seems to happen in the mid-range. The highs is a pretty done deal usually. And the lows, I'm more about the lows in the mid-range now, because without a pulse, music is, unless it's acoustic, or there's different things for different styles, and I love all styles. But anyway, overall EQ, broadcast level, spaces between songs, overall limiting, overall compression, and it gives you a chance if you screw it up in the mix with not enough vocal and not enough snare, not enough kick drum is common. It gives you a second chance to add a final, like, perfect mix. And when you adjust the EQ and mastering, it's tying the whole mix together in a cool way, because when you bring up the kick drum, you're also bringing up the bass drum, and those two frequencies get all mixed together, and they seem to pulse together. Same with vocals and guitars, but you have to be extremely cautious that things just don't become a blurry mess. So I'll get into the environments, because it's just like using effects. I couldn't wait to, so I decided to talk about, getting a very clean signal recorded, getting great mixes, some about mastering. Then I'm going to go back and talk about probably the most important part of any mix is the environments, the close reverb, the medium reverb, the large reverb, where those things come from, and what they mean actually when you sort of translate them to human psychology. And not just generally, but very specifically, certain things bring up certain emotions in people almost without fail, So anyway, I hope some of this stuff's been helpful, but do listen to your stuff and do an overall EQ and an overall limiting on it. And if you do it right, it can add I've added up to like 50% of like the amazingness of a mix, to as little as, usually it's about 10 or the final 10%, maybe 20% sometimes, of just, wow, this is an amazing mix. But it gets left out a lot. So mastering, and it takes a lifetime to learn. You're always learning. It sounds like I'm doing an ad for mastering. Get some at your market now. Vlog out. It's hot.